Welcome back to the Visions of War podcast, hosted by Emmy Award-winning historian Bob Carruthers. This is military history from primary sources.
I'm honoured to have been making military history documentaries for the past 30 years, and in that time I'm proud to have won an Emmy Award. But more importantly, I've also discovered and shared some great primary source material concerning the history of warfare. My Visions of War podcast is brought to you by Combat War Channel. Combat War Channel is the home of a huge array of informative documentaries covering every aspect of military history. You'll find Combat War Channel wherever you get my podcasts, so please be sure to check out Combat War Channel. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. For this episode, I'm joined by my colleague Emma Bernbach as we revisit the tragic events of August 9th, 1945, the day the atom bomb was detonated over the city of Nagasaki. Thank you for joining me as I present Visions of War.
On the 9th of August 1945, a US B-29 bomber named Boxcar dropped an atomic bomb which exploded over the Japanese city of Nagasaki. That bomb was powered by an unimaginable destructive power unleashed by the nuclear fission of plutonium atoms. It was codenamed Fat Man. In the fireball and shockwave triggered by that brutal weapon, 70,000 Japanese civilians were killed, maimed or blinded. In the days, weeks and years which followed, thousands more died from radiation poisoning. The sad fact is that on the 9th of August 1945, Nagasaki was not even the primary target. The bomb dropped on Nagasaki had actually been intended for the city of Kokura. As Kokura was obscured by smoke from earlier raids, Boxcar switched to its secondary target, Nagasaki. The melancholy fact is the nuclear attack on Nagasaki need never have happened. In March 1945, the tides of war were turning against Japan. Nonetheless, Japanese forces continued to stubbornly resist Allied forces in Burma, China, and the Pacific. In every theatre of war, Allied casualties were enormous. Facing the impending Allied invasion were 2.3 million Japanese army troops prepared to defend the home islands to the death. They were backed by a civilian militia of 28 million. Casualty predictions by the Japanese High Command were in the region of 12 million. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi predicted up to 20 million Japanese deaths. Faced with the prospect of fanatical Japanese resistance, United States began a campaign of leaflet drops to warn the Japanese population of their impending danger. The texts of the leaflets were prepared by Japanese prisoners of war, as they were thought to be the voice most likely to appeal to their compatriots. For several months, the US continued to warn civilians of potential air raids by dropping more than 63 million leaflets across Japan.
Read this carefully as it may save your life or the life of a relative or friend. In the next few days, some or all of the cities named on the reverse side will be destroyed by American bombs. These cities contain military installations and workshops or factories which produce military goods. We are determined to destroy all of the tools of the military clique which they are using to prolong this useless war. But, unfortunately, bombs have no eyes. So, in accordance with America's humanitarian policies, the American Air Force, which does not wish to injure innocent people, now gives you warning to evacuate the cities named and save your lives. America is not fighting the Japanese people, but is fighting the military clique which has enslaved the Japanese people. The peace which America will bring will free the people from the oppression of the military clique and mean the emergence of a new and better Japan. You can restore peace by demanding new and good leaders who will end the war. We cannot promise that only these cities will be among those attacked, but some or all of them will be. So heed this warning and evacuate these cities immediately.
The warning leaflets caused enormous concern that the Japanese government ordered the arrest of anyone caught in possession of a leaflet. However, the bulk of the Japanese civilian population regarded the warning messages as truthful. As a result, many Japanese citizens who had the means left the major cities. Those Japanese who left the cities were well advised to do so. On the 25th of July 1945, the Allied powers issued the Potsdam Declaration, which called for the unconditional surrender of Japan. Unfortunately, the Potsdam Ultimatum was met with silence.
The Chief of Staff of the US Army had initially prepared for atomic bombs to be used on 4 Japanese cities: Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata and Kyoto. On 25th of July 1945, Nagasaki was substituted for Kyoto. Kyoto had been spared, but only at the expense of Nagasaki.
The city of Nagasaki was one of the largest seaports in southern Japan. Due to its wide-ranging industrial activity, including the production of torpedoes, ships, military equipment, and other war materials, Nagasaki was of great wartime importance. The 4 largest companies in the city were the Mitsubishi shipyards, electrical shipyards, arms plant, and steel and arms works. Together, they employed about 90% of the city's labor force and accounted for 90% of the city's industry. The city was defended by the 134th Anti-Aircraft Regiment, with 4 batteries of anti-aircraft guns and 2 searchlight batteries. Nagasaki had grown organically without conforming to any city zoning plan. In consequence, domestic homes were squeezed in adjacent to factory buildings throughout the entire industrial valley. In contrast to Hiroshima, which boasted its share of modern concrete and stone buildings, almost all of the buildings in Nagasaki were of old-fashioned Japanese construction, consisting of timber or timber-framed buildings with timber walls and tile roofs.
The important factor, and that of overriding importance, was the fact that by July 1945, the Manhattan Project had actually succeeded in producing not just 1, but 2 types of atomic bomb. Little Boy, which was exploded above Hiroshima on 6th of August 1945, was the world's one and only atomic bomb powered by enriched uranium.
As there was no indication of Japan surrendering, on the 6th of August 1945, the United States detonated the first atomic bomb. The target was the city of Hiroshima. In order to maximize the destructive power of the blast, the bomb was detonated 600 yards above the doomed city. The terrifying suffering unleashed by the atom bomb was far beyond anything experienced by the stoic Japanese population, which was already enduring horrific firebombing of 64 Japanese cities, which had ravaged the Japanese home islands. On the 7th of August, a day after Hiroshima was destroyed, Yoshio Nishina, at the head of Project Nigu, Japan's equivalent of the Manhattan Project, arrived at the city. He was met with a nightmarish scene of utter devastation. Nishina returned to Tokyo and told the cabinet that Hiroshima had been destroyed by a nuclear weapon. However, on the advice of Nishina, Admiral Toyoda, the chief of the Naval General Staff, correctly concluded that the extreme difficulty posed by creating enough fissionable uranium-235 meant that in his estimation only one additional atomic bomb could exist at that point in time. In the light of this knowledge, Japan's Supreme Council for the Direction of War took the crass decision to continue the war. On the 6th of August, Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki.
On the day of the bombing, an estimated 263,000 people were in Nagasaki, including 240,000 Japanese residents, 10,000 Korean residents, 2,500 conscripted Korean workers, 9,000 Japanese soldiers, 600 conscripted Chinese workers, and 400 Allied prisoners of war who were held in a camp to the north of Nagasaki.
However, there should have been one last attempt to warn the citizens of Nagasaki of their impending fate. Millions of leaflets warning of an impending attack on the city were to be dropped on Nagasaki.
To the Japanese people, America asks that you take immediate heed of what we say on this leaflet. We are in possession of the most destructive explosive ever devised by man. A single one of our newly developed atomic bombs is actually the equivalent in explosive power to what 2,000 of our giant B-29s can carry on a single mission. This awful fact is one for you to ponder, and we solemnly assure you it is grimly accurate. We have just begun to use this weapon against your homeland. If you still have any doubt, make inquiry as to what happened to Hiroshima when just one atomic bomb fell on that city. Before using this bomb to destroy every resource of the military by which they are prolonging this useless war, we ask that you now petition the Emperor to end the war. Our President has outlined for you the 13 consequences of an honorable surrender. We urge that you accept these consequences and begin the work of building a new, better, and peace-loving Japan. You should take steps now to cease military resistance. Otherwise, we shall resolutely employ this bomb and all our other superior weapons to promptly and forcefully end the war. Evacuate your cities. Attention, Japanese people. Evacuate your cities. Because your military leaders have rejected the 13-part surrender declaration, two momentous events have occurred in the last few days. The Soviet Union, because of this rejection on the part of the military, has notified your ambassador Sato that it has declared war on your nation. Thus, all powerful countries of the world are now at war with you. Also, because of your leader's refusal to accept the surrender declaration that would enable Japan to honorably end this useless war, we have employed our atomic bomb. A single one of our newly developed atomic bombs is actually the equivalent in explosive power to what 2,000 of our giant B-29s could have carried on a single mission. Radio Tokyo has told you that with the first use of this weapon of total destruction, Hiroshima was virtually destroyed. Before we use this bomb again and again to destroy every resource of the military by which they are prolonging this useless war, petition the Emperor now to end the war. Our President has outlined for you the 13 consequences of an honorable surrender. We urge that you accept these consequences and begin the work of building a new, better, and peace-loving Japan. Act at once, or we shall resolutely employ this bomb and all our other superior weapons to promptly and forcefully end the war.
Even in the wake of the Soviet declaration of war, there was still no immediate indication of Japan surrendering. However, in order to give time for the seriousness of the situation to sink in on Japan's Supreme Council for the Direction of War, the Allies decided to delay the dropping of a second atomic bomb until 11th of August 1945. The primary target was Kokura and the secondary target was Nagasaki. However, and this is the tragic thing, the weather forecast intervened. Despite the almost certain knowledge that Japan would have to endure further nuclear attacks, astonishingly, Japan's Supreme Council for the Direction of War decided the war would go on with the accompanying loss of life and the unimaginable volume of the most appalling suffering. American magic codebreakers intercepted the Japanese cabinet's messages, and the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th was the dreadful result. The important fact is that there was sufficient plutonium for 3 further plutonium-powered atomic bombs. However, there was no guarantee that a plutonium bomb released by the untested method of being dropped from an aircraft for the first time ever would not prove to be a dud. It was vital, therefore, to use the bomb when the weather conditions were perfect. To compound matters, a period of 5 days of bad weather was forecast for 11th of August 1945. It was therefore decided that the detonation of the second atomic bomb would be brought forward by 2 days to 9th of August 1945.
At 3:47 a.m. on the morning of the 9th of August, 1945, Boxcar and the Great Artiste lifted off from Tinian Island. The atomic bomb, codenamed Fat Man, was aboard Boxcar. The bomb was already armed, but the electrical safety plugs were still engaged. Kokura was the primary target, and Nagasaki the secondary target. However, during pre-flight inspection of Boxcar, the flight engineer notified his pilot, Major Charles Sweeney, that an inoperative fuel transfer pump made it impossible to use 640 gallons of fuel carried in a reserve tank. Replacing the pump would take hours. The delicate task of moving the Fat Man to another aircraft would take just as long and was extremely dangerous as well. The bomb was new and unfamiliar technology. It was live and could not be trusted not to detonate if a wrong move was made. Major Sweeney therefore decided that there was no option. The extra fuel would have to be carried all the way to Japan and back. With this added dead weight consuming still more fuel, Boxcar set off on her famous mission and proceeded to the primary target, the city of Kokura.
There were 3 bombing runs over Kokura. However, on arrival over Kokura, the city was obscured by clouds and drifting smoke from fires started by a major firebombing raid by 224 B-29s on nearby Yahata the previous day. Additionally, the Yahata steelworks intentionally burned coal tar to produce black smoke. The clouds and smoke resulted in the aiming point over Kokura being totally obscured. Nonetheless, 3 abortive bomb runs were made over the next 50 minutes, burning fuel and exposing the aircraft repeatedly to the heavy defences around Kokura. Each time, Captain Kermit Behan, the bombardier, was unable to drop the bomb, as in all the smoke and cloud cover, he could not visually identify the target. By the time of the third bomb run, Japanese anti-aircraft fire was getting close, and Second Lieutenant Jacob Besser, who was monitoring Japanese communications, reported activity on the Japanese fighter direction radio broadcasts. The target was therefore switched to Nagasaki. With fuel running low because of the failed fuel pump, Boxcar, accompanied by the great artiste, headed for the secondary target of Nagasaki. The unsuspecting inhabitants of the city of Nagasaki now had one very last chance at salvation. Aboard Boxcar, the decision had been taken that, if on their arrival the city of Nagasaki was obscured by cloud cover, the crew would carry the bomb back to Okinawa and dispose of it in the ocean.
At 7:50 a.m. on the morning of 11th August, 1945, an air raid alert was sounded in Nagasaki, but the all-clear signal was given at 8:30 a.m. Later that morning, at 10:53 a.m., two B-29 superfortresses were sighted. This was Boxcar and the Great Artiste. However, the commander of the Japanese 134th Anti-Aircraft Regiment apparently assumed that the two planes were only on a reconnaissance mission and therefore posed no immediate threat. Therefore, no further air raid alarm was sounded. There was some substantial cloud cover at Nagasaki that morning, and it looked as if the mission would have to be aborted and the bomb dropped in the ocean. However, at 11:01 a.m., a last-minute break in the clouds over Nagasaki allowed Captain Kermit Behan to visually sight the target, which was the point halfway between the Mitsubishi Steelworks in the south and the Nagasaki Arsenal in the north. The Fat Man weapon, containing a core of about 11 pounds of plutonium, was hastily dropped over the city's industrial valley, and Boxcar immediately turned 60 degrees and headed for home.
Fat Boy exploded 47 seconds later at 11:02, some 500 yards above a tennis court. Fortunately for many thousands of Japanese citizens who were destined to survive that fateful day, this spot was nearly 2 miles northwest of the planned hypocenter. The blast was therefore confined to the Urakami Valley. Although the bomb was more powerful than the one used on Hiroshima, its effects were confined by the hillsides to the narrow Urakami Valley. The major portion of the city was therefore protected by the intervening hills. Nonetheless, the death toll from the bomb drop over Nagasaki amounted to 100,000 by the end of 1945. However, a tiny crumb of consolation came from the knowledge that had the bomb been dropped more precisely at the intended aiming point, which was the heart of the historic district, the destruction and the corresponding death toll would have been far greater. Nevertheless, of 7,500 Japanese employees who worked inside the Mitsubishi munitions plant, 6,200 were killed. Some 22,000 other workers also died in other war plants and factories in the city. Yosuke Yamahata photographed this child.
The Nagasaki arsenal was completely destroyed by the blast. About 58% of the Mitsubishi arms plant was damaged, and about 78% of the Mitsubishi steelworks. The Mitsubishi Electric Works suffered only 10% structural damage, as it was on the border of the main destruction zone. Although many fires took root following the bombing, in Nagasaki, a severe firestorm did not develop. However, the ambient wind fanned the flames and spread the fire along the valley.
The second Fat Man plutonium bomb was exploded above Nagasaki at 11 a.m. on 9th of August 1945. The terrifying, destructive power of an atomic bomb can be seen from these two photographs of Nagasaki before and after the bombing. In addition to the horrifying effects of the bomb, the explosion also generated a windstorm several kilometres wide that carried ash, dust and debris over the mountain ranges surrounding Nagasaki. Approximately 20 minutes after the bombing, and for 2 hours solid, a black rain with the consistency of mud or oil came down, carrying deadly radioactive material.
Over the next 6 months, the effects of the atomic bombs killed an estimated 250,000 people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Roughly half occurred on the first day. For months afterwards, many people continued to die from the effects of burns, radiation sickness, and other injuries, compounded by illness and malnutrition. Despite Hiroshima's sizable military garrison, estimated at 24,000 troops, some 90% of the dead were civilians.
Boxcar flew onto Okinawa, arriving with only sufficient fuel for a single approach. The Boxcar came in fast, landing at 140 miles per hour. The number 2 engine died from fuel starvation as he began the final approach. Touching down on only 3 engines midway down the landing strip, Boxcar bounced up into the air before slamming back down hard. Its 3 functioning reversible propellers were insufficient to slow the aircraft adequately, and with both pilots standing on the brakes, Boxcar made a swerving 90-degree turn at the end of the runway to avoid running off it. A second engine died from fuel exhaustion before the plane finally came to a stop.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thank you for taking the time to join me. Please be sure to check out Combat War Channel, where you'll find so many interesting military history documentaries, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for being with me.